Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of These Homestead. My name is Derek, and today we're going to go over 10 things, 10 things that you need to consider whenever you're looking for land to homestead on. All right, come on, let's get going. So item number 1, these aren't in any sort of an order, but here's what I'm going to tell you. There is one that I consider the absolute most important, and I'm going to save it for the very end. So stick around. I know I should just go ahead and tell you now, shouldn't I? Yeah, it'll be at the very end. Okay, number 1, location. Look for land that's in a location that's suitable for homesteading. So you want to make sure that you have favorable climate, soil conditions that match what you want to do with the property. You want to make sure that you're close enough to help if you need it. So like a hospital, how far are you from the grocery store? How far are you from the gas station? How far are you from your work if you work off the homestead? You need to consider all that stuff and look for stuff that meets the criteria that you're looking for. So like this homestead here in particular, that was one of the biggest things I did. It's close to my kids, close to my family, so that's what I wanted. It's not far from town, even though when you're out here, you can't even tell if there's anybody else anywhere around. It's close to everything. Like within 15 minutes, I can be to a grocery store, I can be to a hospital, I can be to a gas station, restaurants. I can be to all that stuff within 15 minutes of this location. But when you're here, you don't hear anybody, you don't see anybody, you don't know anyone that even exists. So it's a rare property to find, but that's what you want to try and search for. Okay, item number 2 that you want to look for, zoning and land use regulations. So you want to check with your local government, make sure that they don't have any stipulations like you can't do chickens on your property, or you can't raise animals on your property, or if you want to do cows, you can't do cows on your property. Well, that sort of throws that property out. You don't want to be on that property if you can't do cows, and that's what you want to do. Same thing with chickens, pigs, any of the other stuff. So make sure you check the zoning and everything for that property. Item number 3, soil quality. Look for land with good soil quality for planting crops or building a garden. As you can see down over the hill there, if you can see it, my garden's down there. So you want to make sure you have, soil that's good enough to actually grow crops if that's what you're planning on doing. If you're not planning on growing a garden, then it doesn't matter. But if you're planning on having your own animals and you want to grow your own hay and stuff like that, and then you get there and the place that you're getting is all woods with just a little tiny pasture, now you can't grow any hay, so that doesn't really work too well for you. So make sure that the soil quality is what you're looking for. Okay, you want to look for land that has access to electricity. As you can see right here, telephone pole. That's what brings the power in. And you can see the power line coming down through the woods right there. That's what brings the power into this homestead. So you want to make sure that you have access to power, because oddly enough, it takes power to homestead. You need power to run things, freezers, all that kind of stuff. If you don't have power, i.e. on grid, and you want to go off grid, like Doug and Stacy, then you need to do solar. Or do like Doug and Stacy and find friends that have power that you can plug freezers in until you eventually end up putting in stuff of your own. So one or the other. So make sure you either have power, on-grid power to your property, you investigate and put in off-grid power to your property, or you have deals worked out with some friends where maybe you're raising cows, and in return for you keeping some freezers plugged in at their house, maybe you donate some beef or some pork if you're raising pigs, or some chicken eggs if you're raising chickens, or some chickens if you're raising chickens. You could do something like that, barter to still get that power. So make sure you think about power. Okay, one of the other things you need to consider is natural resources. So, i.e. firewood. Do you have timber? If you're going to heat your house with firewood, do you have enough land that has trees on it that you can provide enough firewood to keep yourself warm in the winter? Or do you have timber? or coal or natural gas. And then also look into, do you have the mineral rights to all that stuff? A lot of states are different. Depending on what state you're in, you'd want to check to see how the mineral rights and stuff like that go. But a lot of people anymore, they're not selling the rights for the stuff that's underground. They're only selling you the land and the surface minerals. A lot of people are reserving that. Like, I looked at one homestead whenever I was looking at this place. I looked at one homestead where they told me that they would transfer the timber rights to me in 30 years. Who wants to buy that property that I got to wait 30 years before I own the timber rights, and you're going to come just cut the timber on my property anytime in the next 30 years that you feel like it? Guarantee you 29 years from now, they're going to come in there and they're going to clear cut that whole place. And in 30 years, when it transfers over to you, there will be 0 trees left on that property. So make sure you're checking into that kind of stuff, because you don't want to buy a place like that where in 30 years you're going to lose, or in 30 years is when you're finally going to gain the timber rights for that property. Because like I said, 29 years, they'll just wipe it all clean. Same thing with your coal and your natural gas and stuff like that that's underground. Make sure you own those mineral rights and they don't stay with somebody else, because last thing you want to do is make this nice beautiful pasture and have hay fields and stuff like that going, and then all of a sudden one day you wake up and there's drilling rigs sitting out there in the middle of your field because they decided it was time for them to go ahead and try and get that natural gas or that oil or whatever out from underneath your ground. So make sure you're checking out the natural resources and who owns the mineral rights for that stuff. Another thing that you want to look for and look at and consider is topography. And you might say, what do you mean by topography? Well, if you can tell, and I know it's sort of hard to tell, my big field out here, it gently slopes from up there, just gently slopes a little bit down. Still fairly flat. Not really any problem with doing whatever I wanted to do out there, which eventually that's all going to get fenced in and it's all going to have cows and stuff on it. But for right now, if I wanted to produce hay or plant crops, like say I wanted to dig that up and put corn out there, I could. It's still fairly flat. Again, it slopes down gradually, so you want to make sure that you look at things like that, because say it was a real steep hill right down over the hill here. There was a place that just sold. It was like 35 or 40 acres, like 35 acres, I believe it was. And I think they sold it for like $80,000 or $85,000. And a lot of people that I talked to that I told about that property are like, oh my God, that's amazing. You know, that's a really good price. You know, I should look at that. But then I let them know, like, it's on a hill like this. You're not going to put any crops or anything on that. So you want to make sure you're looking at the topography, because it could cause you all sorts of issues if it's real steep and you can't really put anything on there. Like, you can't do crops when you're doing this, unless of course you're cutting banks, you know, you're cutting level spots in the bank, and then you're just putting your crops on that little flat spot. Okay, another thing you want to consider is legal access. Do you have legal access to your property, or is that going to be an issue? Meaning, do you have road access, a driveway, something along those lines to where you can even get to your property? You might say, oh, people can't landlock you. Well, maybe not in your state, but in some states they can. So that's something that you want to make sure that you check and make sure that you have legal access to your property. There's properties here in Pennsylvania, I guarantee you they're landlocked and they can't get to their property. So make sure you check that. Make sure you have legal access to get to your property before you purchase it. Okay, another thing that's important to look for is the history of your land. Like, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good up here in Pennsylvania and some other states around here, especially where they did a lot of strip mining and stuff like that. They removed a lot of coal. West Virginia, Pennsylvania, states like that where they did a lot of that stuff, you want to make sure that you check into the history of that property, because if you buy a place that has been stripped like that, they come in, they remove all the dirt and everything, they get to the coal, they take it out, they put everything back in, and maybe the water will start flowing again the way it was supposed to. Maybe the water will still be good, maybe the water won't still be good. Maybe you'll have a sinkhole, maybe you won't have a sinkhole. Check the history of that property and see whether it's ever been strip mined, or have they went underground and done an underground mine, or if they came in and timbered it all off. Those are all important things that you want to know the answers to. So make sure you find out the history of the land. Okay, another thing you want to take into consideration is cost. And if you remember right, if you watched the last video on some things to consider before starting a homestead, and this one sort of goes hand in hand with that. So if you haven't watched that video, I'll link it here at the end on the end screen so you can go check that one out too. It was 6 things to consider before starting a homestead. Cost. And then whenever I say cost, I'm not just talking about the cost of the land itself that you want to get the homestead. You need to factor in everything, like this big old tractor. If you're going to buy a property where you need this big old tractor, can you afford it? Make sure, just like I told you in that last video, make sure you don't overextend yourself and do like my buddy in that story that I told you about. So make sure that you can afford the expense of the big tractor if you buy a big enough property to where you have to have a big tractor. At the same time, if you can get away with a little tiny tractor, get away with a little tiny tractor. Or if you have a small enough property to where you don't even need a tractor, then you don't have to worry about that. But there's other stuff that you want to do too. Like say you need to make some improvements, or you need to build a barn, or you need to put in a shed, or you need to do this, you need to do that, whatever it is. Replace the roof or a furnace or whatever on this new property that you're getting ready to buy. Make sure you figure that all in whenever you're looking at the cost of what they're wanting to sell that place for, and make sure that you don't overextend yourself and that you can afford it. Hey, the absolute most important thing that you need to look for whenever you're getting ready to purchase your homestead property is right behind me here, and that's water. You need to make sure you have a good quality source of water. Take some of it, have it tested, make sure it's good. Make sure you have a well or a pond on the property, or a stream on the property, or some natural springs on the property. That was one of the main things that I looked for whenever I looked for this property. This property has a well, has a spring-fed pond, and so far that I've found, there's about 15 natural springs that come out on this property. Now, some of them do dry up in the summertime, and that's something that you need to try and find out if you can. Do they dry up in the summer and now you don't have water anymore because it's too hot outside? But luckily for me, not all mine do dry up in the summer. Some of them still flow. So even if we have a really bad year where there's not hardly any rain, there's a few that I know for sure that still run. So I can still have water even if it's one of those weird years where we don't get much rain. But that is one of the biggest things, in my opinion, that you want to look for is water, because you need water to survive. Your animals need water to survive. It's that important. So water should be the #1 thing you look for on your property. Make sure you have some sort of water, and make sure it's a good source of water. If you've ever watched that show, Homestead Rescue, you see a lot of times that's what people have issues with. They bought a property without water, and then they're struggling. They're trying to haul water in from wherever. And I'm not saying you can't do that. You can do that. So if that's your option, and that's what you want to do, you can do that. You can put in a big cistern if there's not one there already, and you can haul water in. You can do rainwater collection. You can do all that kind of stuff. But make sure you have a good, reliable source of water for you and for your animals and for your garden. You can't grow a garden without water either. So make sure you have a good, reliable source of water for all 3 of those things. Hey, and some things I wanted to go over here real quick before we end this is daily nuggets. I'm not sure if you guys have noticed or not, but I've been trying to put up 1 short every day. Early in the morning is when I put it up, usually by like 7 or 8 o'clock. It's usually up Eastern time. I put up this little daily nugget, and it's just a little homesteading fact, nothing major, just facts that I find, and then I make a little video and I post it up there just so people can see it. And it's just stuff to get you thinking. So if you like that kind of stuff, hit that subscribe button down below and consider subscribing to the channel and turn on notifications, and that way you'll get notified whenever I do that kind of stuff. Hey, and by the way, springtime's coming for some of you guys, especially you guys down south and stuff. It's already springtime and you're already starting to plant. If you need to get a Clyde's garden planter, or you're looking for t-shirts or hats or any of that kind of stuff, check out the website. The link's down here below, www.dshomestead.com. Also, some upcoming videos I got coming up next week. Next week's video is one that some of you have been waiting for. How much land do I need to homestead? So that's next week's video. And there's another one that I know a lot of you have been waiting for. Ways to make money on the homestead. That one's coming. I'm in the process. It's coming. I can tell you, maybe that's max 4 weeks. 4 weeks max you'll have that video, but I'm shooting for 3. So make sure you hit that subscribe button if any of these topics are stuff that you'd like to hear about. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video, and if you would, on your way out, hit that like button, click subscribe, share this video with your friends, and turn on the bell notification so that you get notified anytime I post something new. All right, hey, have a good day, and we'll see you next time. Hey, and one last thing that I almost forgot to tell you guys about. I have 2, so not 1, but 2 big contests getting ready to start. First one, we're almost to 500 subscribers. I told you guys at the end of the last contest, that would be the next contest, is when we hit 500 subscribers. So that one's getting ready to fire off. I'll have details for it on the next video. So make sure you watch next week's video on the how much land do you need to homestead. That's where the details will be for the 500 subscriber contest. We're not at 500 yet, so I should probably hold off and not do it yet. So if you haven't subscribed, hit it down below. Get that number up to 500, and let's see what we can do. But so far, we're getting close enough. I think we'll get there within the next month or so. All right, hey, in the other contest, this is a big one. It's a big contest, and it's gonna be for those of you who grow your own tomatoes, or you grow your own pumpkins, or you grow both. So that's all I can tell you. If you grow either one of those 2 things, or you grow both those 2 things, hit that subscribe button down below. Within the next 3 weeks, you'll have the details for that contest. So, like I said, hit that subscribe. See you next time.